worms. A few feet beneath me, the stairway jutted out into a titanic arch, unearthly as the span that bridges Hell and leads to Asgard. It curved out and down straight through the top of the highest pile of carven cylinders, and then it vanished through it. It was appalling. It was demonic. The crawling man stopped. His eyes rolled up into his head. He trembled, and again his arms and legs began their horrible crawling movement. From his lips came a whispering. It was an echo of the high murmuring we had heard the night he came to us. I put my hands over his eyes. He quieted. "The thing's accursed," he said. "The people of the pit." Did I whisper? Yes, but they can't get me now. They can't. After a time, he began as quietly as before. "I crossed that span. I went down through the top of that building. Blue darkness shrouded me for a moment, and I felt the steps twist into a spiral. I wound down, and then I was standing high up in I can't tell you what. I'll have to call it a room. We have no images for what it is in the pit. 100 feet below me was the floor. The wall sloped down and out from where I stood in a series of widening crescents. The place was colossal, and it was filled with a curious mottled red light. It was like the light inside a green and gold-flecked fire opal. The spiral stairs wound below me. I went down to the last step. Far in front of me rose a high columned altar. Its pillars were carved in monstrous scrolls, like mad octopuses with 1,000 drunken tentacles. They rested on the backs of shapeless monstrosities carved in crimson stone. The altar front was a gigantic slab of purple covered with carvings. I can't describe these carvings. No human being could. The human eye cannot grasp them any more than it can grasp shapes that haunt the fourth dimension. Only a subtle sense in the back of the brain grasped them vaguely. They were formless things that gave no conscious image, yet pressed into the mind like small hot seals, ideas of hate, of combats between unthinkable monstrous things, victories in a nebulous hell of steaming, obscene jungles, aspirations and ideals immeasurably loathsome. And as I stood, I grew aware of something that lay behind the lip of the altar 50 feet above me. I knew it was there. I felt it with every hair and every tiny bit of my skin. Something infinitely malignant, infinitely horrible, infinitely ancient. It lurked, it brooded, it saw me, it threatened, and it was invisible. Behind me was a circle of blue light. Something urged me to turn back, to climb the stairs and make away. It was impossible. Terror of that unseen watching thing behind the altar raced me onward like a whirlwind. I passed through the circle. I was in a way that stretched on into dim distance between the rows of carven cylinders. Here and there the red trees arose. Between them rolled the stone burrows. And now I could take in the amazing ornamentation that clothed them. They were like the trunks of smooth-skinned trees that had fallen and had been clothed with high-reaching fantastic orchids. Yes, those cylinders were like that, and more. They should have gone out with the dinosaurs. They were monstrous. They struck the eyes like a blow, and they passed across the nerves like a rasp. And nowhere was there sight or sound of a living thing. There were circular openings in the cylinders, like the opening in the temple of the stairway through which I had run. I passed through one of them. I was in a long, bare, vaulted room whose curving sides half closed 20 feet over my head, leaving a wide slit that opened into another vaulted chamber above. I saw nothing in the room save the same mottled reddish light of the temple. I stumbled. Still, I could see nothing. But my skin prickled and my heart stopped. There was something on the floor over which I had tripped. I reached down, and my hand touched a thing, cold and smooth, that moved under it. I turned and ran out of that place. I was filled with a sick loathing that had in it something of madness. I ran on, blindly, wringing my hands, weeping with horror. When I came to myself, I was still among the stone cylinders and red trees. I tried to retrace my steps, to find the temple, for now I was more than afraid. I was like a new soul panic-stricken with the first terrors of hell. But I could not find the temple, and the haze began to thicken and glow, the cylinders to shine more brightly. Suddenly I knew that it was dusk in my own world above, and that the thickening of the haze was the signal for the awakening of whatever things lived in the pit. I scrambled up the sides of one of the burrows. I hid behind a twisted nightmare of stone. Perhaps, I thought, there was a chance of remaining hidden until the blue lightened, the peril passed, and I could escape. There began to grow round me a murmur. It was everywhere, and it grew and grew into a great whispering. I peeped from the side of the stone down into the street. I saw lights passing and repassing. More and more lights. They swam out of the circular doorways, and they thronged the street. The highest were 8 feet above the pave, the lowest perhaps 2. They hurried, they sauntered, they bowed, they stopped and whispered, and there was nothing under them. "Nothing under them?" breathed Anderson. "No," he went on. "That was the terrible part of it. There was nothing under them. Yet certainly the lights were living things. They had consciousness, volition. What else? I do not know. They were nearly 2 feet across, the largest. Their center was a bright nucleus, red, blue, green. This nucleus faded off gradually into a misty glow that did not end abruptly. It, too, seemed to fade off into nothingness, but a nothingness that had under it somethingness. I strained my eyes, trying to grasp this body into which the lights merged and which one could only feel was there, but could not see. And all at once I grew rigid. Something cold and thin like a whip had touched my face. I turned my head. Close behind were 3 of the lights. They were a pale blue. They looked at me, if you can imagine lights that are eyes. Another whiplash gripped my shoulder. Under the closest light came a shrill whispering. I shrieked. Abruptly, the murmuring in the street ceased. I dragged my eyes from the pale blue globe that held them and looked out. The lights in the streets were rising by myriads to the level of where I stood. There they stopped and peered at me. They crowded and jostled as though they were a crowd of curious people on Broadway. That was the horrible part of it. I felt a score of the lashes touch me. I shrieked again. Then darkness and a sensation of falling through vast depths. When I awoke to consciousness, I was again in the great place of the stairway, lying at the foot of the